So here's my Nancy block, and thus far I have done 4 out of the 5 sections. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 are done. The only one that remains is number 5. And I'm changing this up a little bit. Normally number 5 would not be the kaleidoscope print fabric. It would be something else that would coordinate with all of these, with the 3 fabrics that are already here. But there are some blocks in this particular course that have more than one kaleidoscope block. So I'm actually going to use my big print for number 5 as well. And remember, when we placed the first one, we had this nice rectangle to line it up with. I haven't got a rectangle for number 5. That's okay, I can make it work. I just have to make sure that I have some way of making sure, like this stack, these are all perfectly identical. But in order to make the kaleidoscope work properly, I have to make sure that I attach them to the rest of the block in exactly the same way. So let me take one of these and one of these, and I can grab where the seam allowance is here, and I can grab the other seam allowance. So that's approximately how it needs to line up. But I can do approximately for the first block, but for the other 3, I have to be able to do it exactly the same way. So let's take a look here. This is the outer, this is where the outer dotted line is, the seam allowance. So this is the edge of what will appear in the finished block on this side. So what if I measure from the tip of this piece of fabric here, the one that I'm adding, so the print one that's face up, I'm going to measure from the tip of that fabric to where this line is here. And actually it's lining up, wow, that's really wild. The seam allowance line is actually lining up with this 60-degree line on my ruler, but, well, not quite. If I line up properly with the tip on that side, there, I would say that my seam allowance line, it's just a little bit over from the 1 1/8. So maybe if I move this just a little bit this way, maybe I can get it to be exactly, get this seam allowance line right here to be exactly 1 inch from where the tip is. So it's still a little bit more than 1 inch, so I'm going to slide it just a little bit more that way. Yes. So now I'm 1 inch. Let me just line the rest of that up. And I think I'm going to put a pin in here just to hold that all together until I get over to the sewing machine. Maybe I'll throw another one in on this side. So that one is done, and now I have to do the same thing for all of the other blocks. So if I put a pencil mark here where my seam allowance line, so that's the seam allowance line coming along there. So put a mark there. And then if I go out 1 inch from that, that should line up with where the tip of my fabric is. So just have to slide that across until that mark is lining up with the tip of the fabric. And then just ease all of the rest of that back to line up with it as well. And you could put in a couple of pins to hold everything together until I get over to the sewing machine. So that's got the second one. And then I just continue with the other two to make sure that they're lined up in the same way. So right there, that's where the seam allowance meets the fold. So I'll measure over 1 inch, put another mark there, and that's what I want to line the tip up with. Okay, so that's that one. Last one. That's where my seam allowance meets the fold. Come over 1 inch from that. Now it's going to be a little bit different depending on which block you're making. But remember what I did to come up with this 1 inch measurement was I put them together, the first block, just lining it up like we normally do. And then I looked at what we had, and it was close to 1 inch. It was just a little bit over. And so I tweaked it to make it exactly 1 inch. And then I had an easy measurement that I could use for all of them. Okay, so now those are ready to go over and be sewn.